All right, welcome to the Armchair Commanders podcast. My name is John,
And I'm Jack.
and this week we are deviating a little bit from our normal viewing experience. Generally, we stick with movies, but we have a special guest joining us this week, and he has chosen to review the miniseries Generation War. Matthew, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell the folks about yourself.
Yeah, hi, my name's Matt Leitch. I played Floyd Talbot in Band of Brothers. I run a podcast called We Happy Few 506 and tours and battlefield tours and that kind of stuff. And you guys reached out to me to come on your pod to chat about war films. And every single war film I suggested, someone else had already reviewed. So I decided that I wouldn't mind talking about Generation War.
Apologies about that.
No, that's fine.
The good ones always seem to go first.
Yeah, I wanted to do Come and See, but I think someone already done that one. Although that always...
Yep, that was one of our first movies.
Kind of makes you sound like a bit of a douche when you choose that one, it being Russian and everything. But Generation War is fairly recent. I think it's about 10 years old, something like that. And I thought it was fantastic. So yeah, as far as I can remember, I will talk about it. Whether or not I can do an entire review of 3 90-minute movies back to back, I'm not sure, but I'll give you my insight to it as is.
Right. So I guess my starting off question would be, what about this particular series stuck out to you that made it your choice for this week?
Well, I sort of, it's one of those things where you just think, ooh, that's interesting. I'll tap on that at 11:30 at night once you've put your kids to bed and you want to watch 15 minutes of TV. And then it's 2:45 in the morning and you know you're in trouble because you've been watching it for hours on end because it's brilliant. And then your daughter's going to jump on you at 6 o'clock in the morning and wake you up. And it's a terrible error. I just tapped on the title because I thought, I'll watch a bit of that. Like I said, it's a German show. And it's really well done. It's very high budget. I think it's brilliantly scripted. It's brilliantly acted. The lead actor in it, whose name I can never remember, although I do know his first name is Volker, is a fantastic actor. He's also the lead, if you've seen it, it's a show called Babylon Berlin, which if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching, which is about the period sort of in the early 30s to around the ascension of the Nazis in Germany. It's all set in Berlin, and it's fantastically done. It's sort of a bit like something Christopher Isherwood would have written, who wrote Cabaret, who wrote I'm a Camera that became Cabaret. And the lead actor in that is a guy called Volker. He's a very skinny guy, and he heads a cast of, there's 5 of them, I believe. There's him, his brother, and their friend, and then the 2 women in their lives. And it follows them. This is Generation War, by the way. It follows them from sort of these sort of young, idealistic, healthy Germans. Not necessarily fascists, but they're idealistic Germans. And he himself wants to go out and right. fight and be part of. He's not a Nazi. Be part of this sort of like glorious quest east for Lebensraum. But the third of them, their friend, is in fact a Jewish tailor, who one of the girls continually sort of hides and tries to help escape and that sort of stuff. And they make a pact that they were going to meet up in a year's time in this same pub once they've all gone off and they've conquered Russia and stuff. And they're going to meet up. And of course, it doesn't go to plan at all. The lead fella that this Volker brilliant actor plays, sort of, he's a brilliant soldier and a brilliant leader of men. His brother goes with him, and his brother's, he's not a pacifist, but he refused to fight. He just says this is going to be a murder machine. I think he describes it as, or a meat grinder, and he refused to fire. Keep going east. Right. Co-opted into the Einsatzgruppe, and he ends up just committing horrendous atrocities, joylessly committing horrendous atrocities as they go east. And then get pushed back again, and everything just sort of falls to pieces. It's that sort of it's the sort of end of that sort of German ideal suddenly falls to pieces as they start getting crushed out east, and then they start getting pushed back, and then they're fighting for survival. Um, and one of the girls, one of them joins up and becomes a nurse and sort of helps people out, and the other one's got ambitions to be a singer, and she ends up dating an SS officer to try and further her career. And it's in doing that she ends up getting herself in the situation where she ends up being sent to jail and ultimately executed.
Right.
But what stands out for me as a show, other than how well it's done, is just how well acted it is.
I would agree
There's some
with that,
brilliant,
and I
brilliant
think
actors in it.
it's also very well written. Um, it was very reminiscent to me because I had not seen this show before, but I did watch. I can't remember what year it came out, but it was fairly recent where they did a. Uh,
Oh
they
yeah,
came
my
out
co-host Doug Allen's
with
in that.
a reboot of Das Boat,
Yeah, he is.
which
Yeah, I think he plays
was
a
turned
British
into kind
officer
of
in it.
the. Is he? That's That's fantastic. I love that show. I love the original Das Boat, but I love the expansion of the story that they did with that miniseries. But this show is very reminiscent, at least visually, it was very similar, and as far
Yeah,
as
and I think
the
what was
shifting
yeah.
perspectives, it was also reminiscent of that as well.
Well, sorry to
But
interrupt you, but
I
I think
at first,
it's difficult. If you are an American, or if you're English, or you're a Canadian filmmaker or
no, it's all good.
television showmaker, and you decide to tackle that period in history, you've sort of got carte blanche to do what you want. Do you know what I mean? It's like, all right, we're going to tell this story, and we may show, like in Band of Brothers, we may show scenes where Spears allegedly shoots prisoners, or we may do this, or we may do that. But if you are German and you're coming at it from a German perspective, I mean, you've really got to walk a very fine line of telling the truth, showing what happened, but in no way glamour. You can't in any way look like you've glamorized it. Do you know what I mean? I does that very, very well. Perspective.
Right. It's almost as if it's almost
Yeah,
as if
yeah, or
from
yeah.
their perspective
I
they
mean,
almost
they
have
do
to
that,
take
or
the
they do what they
anti-war film
did,
approach every time
which
they do
is
it.
to just show you a no holes
I mean,
barred
yeah.
uh, a depiction of what it was like for sort of Wehrmacht soldiers, which is what the two brothers were involved in. Well, the elder brothers involved in, and then they just offset it with this sort of the Einsatzgruppe stuff, the executions and all that stuff, which they showed just completely no holes barred. It was just sort of banal in the way they were just going from village to village, just executing people. And there's just this sort of like joyless submission on the brother's face as he's just killing more and more people in from town to town, which I thought was brilliantly done. And the guy that plays the head Einsatzgruppe officer that shoots the little kid after he gives him chocolate, he's a brilliant actor as well. He's in a show called Deutschland 83. He's a great actor, that fella.
Yeah. I gotta say, I had to pause the show after that particular scene just because it was so abrupt and unexpected. It was just so like like you like the horrors of the Holocaust are, obviously very well known, and lots of shows and lots of movies I think demonstrate those horrors very well. But just like a civilian getting executed is not like a new concept for a depiction of the Holocaust, but just how abrupt that particular moment was in the show, I was like, oh shit. And I was like, I have to pause, and like I had to like process it for a minute before I could
Yeah,
continue
and the
again,
fact
because I
that
was
they sort of
like,
choose a child
was not like,
and
even
they've
though I
given him
know this
chocolate
is
and all that
stuff
business,
that
and then he
happens,
just
it's
turns
like
around,
I'm not
puts one in
expecting
the back
it
of his
still.
head. It's very, it is very arresting scene there, and that again, that I think that's quite reminiscent of Come and See. Some of the scenes in Come and See, it reminded me of that as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely
this
would have
had a
been
lot of
my
similarities to that movie, which was one of the
yeah.
first movies we picked for
Yeah,
this
any cheery
podcast.
shows on the podcast or
We had quite the depressing streak.
Oh yeah. We don't really do well.
right?
You
I don't
could,
know,
I
does
guess
300 count?
you could argue that Starship Troopers is kind of cheery in that whole fascist propaganda kind of way.
Yeah,
Wow,
You know
that sounds really fucked up. Me saying
that
that out
Dale Dye
loud.
did a boot camp
especially on the episode we're talking about
for
actual
Starship
Nazis.
Troopers, and he
Yeah,
was the
that's
military consultant on it.
Actual
His
fascists.
group,
That's
Warriors
right.
Inc. That was I think it was one of the first shows. Yeah, I think it was one of the first films that they worked on, other than Platoon, obviously, years previously. Yeah, him and his team did
was
all
not
the
aware of
sort of
that.
military consultation on Starship Troopers. That's was the filming accident hiring
Huh.
Dale Dye?
I knew that they had a filming accident during that film, but I wasn't aware of it specifically.
Because it could be considered so.
Perhaps. But so, Jack, had you ever heard of or seen this series before?
I have actually. A buddy of mine and I were just watching YouTube, and you know those like videos that show up that are just bluntly describe the plot of a movie,
Yeah.
like man is trapped 3,000 years in the future, and then it's just a rapid fire of a guy saying, "This is Tom. He's trapped in 3,000 years in the future." Well, this is Wilhelm Winter. He's a Nazi soldier. We watched an entire rundown like that of the series just because it popped up in our recommendations and we were bored one night. So that I was like, huh, because you sent me that link. I'm like, why does this show sound familiar? And I'm like, oh, it's this one, the Sad Nazi show.
I was under the impression that I was completely unfamiliar with this, but I had a similar experience where YouTube does its job of recommending just random clips and stuff. Um, and a long, long time ago, YouTube recommended to me the scene where they're in all the German soldiers are all in the swamp, and then the one soldier steps on a mine, and I think it's I always get Wilhelm and Friedhelm switch. Whoever decided to choose those two as the names did not think that one through, because I was like, and maybe this is just me being an American, but I was like, I'm having a super hard time differentiating the two names between the two actors. But one of the main characters yells out, and it's kind of become a meme almost. He's like, "Meanin!" And then they back out, and then there's the big explosion. So that was I was like, huh, that's like I never made connected the dots that was from this series. But other than that, I had never seen anything else from this show.
Yeah, yeah, highly recommended.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to say, don't
finally
start
get
it
to
late at
watch it off
night,
my
because if you
watch
start it
list.
late at
That's for
night, you're
sure.
going to be up till 5 o'clock in the morning. Because I think the
I watched
two
it almost all
episodes
in one sitting
they
too.
they end on cliffhangers as well, as I remember, where you're pretty sure one of the brothers has died. Yeah,
Yeah, it's hard to walk away from it. Um, Now, obviously, like we had talked about, has multiple characters with multiple story arcs.
1
What
second,
would you
my dog's trying to
say,
come in.
Matt, was your favorite character story arc?
It's a good question. Um, I guess the younger brother that starts out like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to farm a rifle. There's no way I'm going to do anything. Who gets forced to execute somebody, and then it just becomes kind of rote to him. I thought that was quite. I didn't see that coming, and I thought that was quite shocking. Um, that's they're all good story arcs, all of them actually. Um, but I do like the singer that dates the Nazi, that dates the fascist, and then ends up she just pushes it far too far and calls his house and says she's his mistress, and then he ends up putting her in jail and she ends up getting executed. And all the way through it, you think she's not going to get executed. There's going to be an 11th hour saving or something, but she does. That's a massive spoiler to anybody who's not seen it, by the way. I think that's a very I still think that's pretty shocking. Um, but yeah, I think of that, those two are pretty good. But the main guy, I'm just a huge fan of the main guy. The guy who plays the lead in it, that Volker fellow. I think he's fantastic. He's fantastic in that, and he's fantastic in Babylon Berlin. I mean, just if you haven't seen that, you should go and watch all 5 seasons, whatever it is of that. That is a brilliant, brilliant show as well. Just so well put together.
I definitely appreciated how the roles of the two brothers, they switch. You
Yeah,
have
yeah,
one who's the good soldier, does as he's told, and then eventually gets caught as the quote unquote deserter, and then you have the uncooperative brother who becomes you know the ideal like killing machine. Um, it was a clever twist, I thought, especially with how the
yeah,
show opens up, where the quote unquote good brother is like, "This is my brother. He's about to no longer be useless,"
yeah.
and you see him like fall to the ground, and you're like, "Are we really starting off with this guy like shit talking his brother?" Like,
Who
but
presumably died.
yeah,
For all we the audience knows.
I was like, man, it was a little difficult just
Yeah,
because with that first episode you start with the two brothers being tight, and obviously they go to that friend get together at the bar, and then maybe like 2 minutes later we're projected to them on the Eastern Front, and one brother's an officer and he's like, "You're a shitbag," and it's like, hold up, what happened here?
and then there's a sort of switch
But
again later on when they go and try and take out that radio station, and the elder brother doesn't want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and the younger brother's like, I don't know where we are, what the hell we're doing, but I do expect you to lead us. That's a very, very powerful scene as well, because the elder
it
brother's
That
just
was
he's,
was
he's just losing his mind. He's like, you know what? 6 months ago, we were 300 kilometers further away than we are now. We're just going backwards. And he's suddenly
that
realizing the
was
vastness of the task in front of them, and the futility of it, and the fact that they're losing as well. And every day they're losing ground.
that was actually one of my favorite scenes in this entire series. Is
Yeah,
that
mine too.
scene where he fucking loses it and just
Yeah.
charges the telegraph station. That's it.
And when he gets to, there's
And
nothing
he
there.
bursts
Yeah.
in. Yeah, it's just a room of trashed equipment and dead bodies. And he's like, for all this, and he just has that breakdown, and him and that dude is just gonna chill there, stewing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
for me, my my favorite arc, and it still includes the older brother, but I really loved the nurse arc with the character named Charlie. Um, it again is one of those things that war movies oftentimes have like a field hospital scene or like an aid station scene, and you get a taste of it. But with this story arc with Charlie, you're seeing like the day-to-day horrors of just like an endless flow of broken human beings being brought into her. And um I feel like the great culminating moment with that story arc is, for a brief period of time, she believes Volker's character is dead because that's what his brother said. And his brother's also under this impression too, because he's like, I saw him die. And obviously he didn't die, and he gets put into a penal uh, company, which is an interesting concept in and of itself to explore because um, I, I haven't really heard, I'm sure there was, but I haven't really heard of like American or British penal units being like frontline duty. But it was definitely a thing with like the Germans and the Russians just because of like the all out war that they were waging. Um, but he is briefly at the hospital after she's been told he's dead, and he's like, "I'm not dead. I'm alive." And he's like, "Thank God you're here, and I can see you." And she just has a complete breakdown, and it's very much the like you can see how deep seated some of this fanaticism is, because for her she's like, you being dead is better than you being a traitor. Like, I loved you and I can't handle this image of you. And for me, that was a super powerful one.
Yeah, and she gets because of she is actually quite idealistic, isn't she? And then there is also the scene where, I mean, she's this sort of idealistic nurse who's helping the men as they go out east and all this great mission that they're on and all the rest of it. And then there's the scene where she's treating this one soldier who's wounded up in bed, and he's quite he's got a sort of sinister arrogance about him, this soldier. And he talks to her, and he says what he does, and he's part
Oh,
of, I can't remember which regiment it
he
is,
says
but he says
the
we're
Ghost Legion.
we're known as the Ghost. Yeah, the Ghost Legion. Yeah, we make people disappear, and you see it register on her face. Like, what does that mean?
Hmm.
That's really good as well. Like, you see it register on her face. Like, does that mean what I think that means? And then she's,
And then we get that quick, oh yeah, he's dead, by the
yeah,
way, later in the episode.
I found, and I find it interesting, um, just from the American perspective. I don't know if you being from Britain, if there's anything in your guys' history that has a similar correlation, but the way that they portray fanaticism in this and in recent media, it's definitely seems like they go out of their way to, even if you have quote unquote good characters, they still are diminished or tampered by the surrounding fanaticism. Whereas like they could say something that's um they'd be like, I'm not so sure about this final victory. It's not even like a screw you Adolf statement. It's just a, I'm not sure if we're winning, guys. And you'll get like a half dozen people around them that are like, that's defeatist. Like like you get a scene where literally the younger brother gets beat up because he makes these smart comments. And like for us here in America, I would say the biggest or closest thing we have to that is there's a lot of
mm-hmm.
revisionist history that came up around our own Civil War, and it's something we still struggle with today, is portraying the Civil War accurately and what the causes were, because our Civil War was based around slavery, and it's been a real struggle for us to depict that accurately just because of the whole Reconstruction and reconciliation thing. But I find it an interesting view to see this country that participated in great atrocities like being very forward with, this is the mindset
Yeah,
of the
it's
people
a
of
very
the
good point
time.
that you raise. I
Even
mean,
the
when I
dissenting people
do
were tampered by it.
tours, when we do tours, like if we go to Dachau, I think it is whether it's enshrined in law or not. I'm not entirely sure, but every 14-year-old German school student goes to Dachau or goes, so it's met head on at a very young age that this was the atrocities of our forefathers. So then, if they were to then see that then depicted, or the Holocaust or the atrocities depicted in sort of popular culture in TV shows later on, they're not sat there thinking that's not how it happened, or that's not we were part of this sort of thing. It's very much in the sort of psyche because they have been educated about it at a young age, in a no holes barred type way. In a listen, this is where we're going. This is what you're going to learn about. This is what happened. May it never happen again type way, which is really, it's great. I mean, it's an amazing thing that they do. But of course, you ask about being British, um, and whether or not there's any revisionist stuff with us. I mean, yeah. I mean, goodness me. I mean, the Brits invented the concentration camp. We don't really bring that up very often. But in the Boer War, that's how. I mean, we were beaten in the First Boer War, and the Second Boer War, when we went back, the only way to defeat the Boers was to round up their families and starve them to death in concentration camps. So, I mean, it's not a German invention, it's a British invention. And there aren't too many references to that in popular culture or TV shows or films. We don't so much do revisionist stuff like the Civil War stuff that you guys do. We just don't deal with it at all. Right.
See, that's
the Japanese school of history lessons.
yeah, the Japanese method of teaching everything was fine until the Fire Nation attacked method. But
man, I think my favorite character. What was that? Did you say something? Anyone?
Jack,
No?
continue with your
Okay.
thought.
Anyway, I think my favorite character story was Victor's out of all of this.
Victor was the tailor, right?
Yeah, the Jewish tailor. And boy, what a time to be a Jewish tailor.
No, he
Yeah.
it's interesting because you're expecting him, of all the characters, you get the idea that he is going to be the one who bites it first.
I was
And
waiting for it.
especially, just given the overall story of World War II and the Holocaust, you're like, oh, we have one Jewish character. Like, that's the one character that you're for sure thinking, like, this is what's going to happen to him. And then, like, his story just keeps changing, and you're like, you keep getting surprised by it.
One thing I was curious about, though, and from what I can see, it's a common I don't want a complaint about the series is the people he falls in with and how they're violently anti-Semitic and even giving the Germans a run for their money. The Polish resistance, when in reality the Polish resistance drew heavily from escaped Jews, well, recruited from escaped Jews from Germany.
I think that was maybe in the specific instance it wasn't that accurate, but I think that was meant to be more of a representation of the fact that not only the Germans were
Yeah.
anti-Semitic, like anti-Semitic thought was very strong and prevalent amongst many groups of people in Europe at this time. It's just the Germans did the heavy lifting of atrocities against them.
Yeah, I mean, has there been a lot of complaint about how that was depicted? Because I don't know.
Oh yeah, quite a bit in Poland.
I'll bet, yeah, because of Polish resistance. I don't know. It seemed, I don't know. To me, it seemed to ring kind of true. Maybe for the reasons that you're saying. Maybe it just dramatically seems to ring true that I mean, there was great swathes of anti-Semitism at the time, all over everywhere. So I mean, it was just one or two of the characters, the leaders of that particular Polish resistance, that were violently anti-Semitic, and it wasn't. I don't think it was necessarily saying that the entire Polish resistance was anti-Semitic, because, like you said, it drew heavily upon sort of escaped Jewish people from around the place. But I don't know. I think, to me, it seemed to ring kind of true. Do you know what I mean? Like, this guy is running for his life, and everywhere he goes, he's up against people who hate him. It seemed to me that's what it is. I think it's that it's no safe space for him. That he's in mortal danger whichever way he turns, unless he hides who he really is, which he can't really do.
I
Yeah,
did
you could really
continue, Jack.
yeah, you could really feel the tension during the scenes when he's on that train to concentration camp, when they're frantically like digging at the wooden floorboards with like knives or whatever they could have, whatever they could grab, and then falling through it out of a moving train and onto the tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's potential death is better than guaranteed death.
Yeah, that's it. It's an easy choice to make when you're facing death down.
I will say I did read a little. I read some reviews of this, and I saw that um, this show actually got some criticism for not being. Um, the show got criticism for essentially taking on the topic of the Holocaust easy. Like, there's a lot of people who are wanting it to be more graphic and upfront and what have you. And I think the biggest one was the lack of, our of Victor like actually making it to Auschwitz. Like, we see a sign that's like X amount of kilometers away from Auschwitz, and then he escapes. And I feel like that's an unfair judgment of this series, because when I watched it, at no point was I like, they're kind of sweeping this under the rug. I'm like, no, we're seeing atrocity after atrocity being committed within this series. We just don't see the big camp.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah, and even, I mean, I don't know.
pick and choose your battles, I
I
guess.
guess as
But
well, but you also have to think from a dramatic point of view. If you are putting together a series of characters and people that you want, in a sense, to cheer for, people that you want to be engaged in their story arc, and if you've got a Jewish character that joins a resistance, escapes on the train, and opens the train carriages up, tries to get bodies out, and all that kind of stuff, that's an empowered character to an extent. Would it have pleased anybody anymore from watching point of view if he'd have just gone to Auschwitz and been killed? I mean, there are stories of incredible heroism. There are stories of incredible tenacity to escape, and standing up and fighting in small pockets everywhere. So why not tell that story? Why not make it part of this show? And then why be up in arms about it? It doesn't seem to make sense to me, that argument. It's not that they didn't depict. I mean, half of the train carriage of the escapes of these horribly, wretched people who've had this terrible time, who are emaciated. When he tries to free all those guys in the carriage, you are seeing all that horror. But don't I don't see the issue with having him having him not go to the camp. I think dramatically it's justified.
so I here's kind of a more specific question for you, Matt. And
Sure.
obviously in the series Band of Brothers,
Yeah.
there's an episode where you get a very upfront view of a concentration camp.
Landsberg, yeah.
Um, what is it like as an actor trying to go through and portray that particular event in that realistic setting?
Well, there was yeah, it's a good question. No one was allowed to see the set before we went on it. Usually, you can just kind of wander around and half eat your breakfast in your hand and have a cup of coffee and see what's behind whatever door. No one was allowed to see it. It was, I believe, filmed either all in one day or maybe just 2 days. Everyone was given like a severe talking to beforehand because obviously it's guys hanging out, and we've been hanging out for the best part of a year, so there's little cliques and we make each other laugh and all this kind of stuff. So we were all sort of like set straight as to what was going to happen. And then they sort of like open the camp gates up, and then everyone sort of walks in. And they had all these guys who were emaciatedly thin, and there was little burning piles of stuff and everything. And the director, David Frankel, I believe, I don't want to speak out of turn here, I believe he was the son of survivors himself. So yeah, it was incredibly eerie, is what I'll say. Just shortly, it was incredibly eerie. It's an incredibly eerie couple of days. And there was no joy in it. Do you know what I mean? The whole series was incredibly fun to shoot, but that was just, it was pretty awful actually. And there was just there was never any attempt to sort of, it was like, cut, all right, well, let's go off and do something light for a while. You were just there for a couple of days in this appalling situation, and you just kind of had to stand there and deal with it. And everyone kind of dealt with it in different ways and stuff. And afterwards, everyone was sort of like hugging one another and thankful that it wasn't, we were all alive, really.
Dang.
Yeah, it's not.
No, that sounds like a really intense experience. And it just makes me wonder, just because they didn't have a camp scene per se in this film, we still are, the actors are still present for the atrocities of like the Einsatz group and whatnot. So I was just curious if you would think there would be kind of a similar feeling to those scenes, or do you think those kind of scenes would hit you kind of like any other like action type scene?
No, I think it was really similar. I think the stuff where he's executing partisans and all the stuff, the brother, and the scene where he wanders around and there's all he's like treading and blood's kind of soaking up through the ground, through his boots and stuff. I think particularly that actor, I think he was given a very thankless task, and I think he portrayed it very well. And you can see he had a pretty rough time of things for the filming. I doubt very much that he bounced from one scene to an adrenaline film battle scene to that. I think it was probably a lot of it was filmed in one sequence, so that he could get the arc of. It's weird because his character arc sort of, it gets progressively worse, but he just the life seems to be getting sucked out of him. Do you know what I mean? So by the end of it, it looks like he almost doesn't care. He's just thinking, someone please bloody shoot me.
He's like a shell of a human.
Absolutely, that's what it appears to be. He's almost like leant up against that gallows, and he's sort of like pulling the lever or whatever it is he has to do, and he does just seem like a shell of a human, yeah. And it rang very true to me watching it. Maybe he's just a brilliant actor, but I would have thought if the director was any good or the producers was any good, they would have run a lot of those scenes back to back. Do you know what I mean? In the way that they scheduled them, they would have run one after another. So
Right.
it just gets relentlessly frigging horrible. But at the same time, there's a sort of repetitiveness to it. So part of him's just going through the motions, which is what he is doing as a character as well. He is just going through the motions and just blocking it all out.
It sounds like a very intense experience. I think oftentimes we think of actors as just like they show up and play their part and go home versus, you know, this particular subject matter and these particular scenes obviously are very draining on a person, even if you are, you know, just pretending to do these things. Like you are still dealing with those, you know, like this was a real event and this actually did happen and now I am more or less participating in it. But, you know, you're not completing the act, but you still have that feeling of I am a participant in this now.
Yeah, and I think what that is, I mean, what happens when you're an actor is, you know, if you're any good, I think, is you fall in love with your character straight away. Um, you know, you're in love with this person. You want this person to have a good, you know, a good story arc, a good life. You want this person to be exciting and do fun things. You want this person to fall in love. You know, you want to be the good guy. Uh, if your character arc is involved in something horrendous like this, and it seems so real around you, it does start to affect you. Do you know what I mean? This guy did this. Wait, this, you know, this really happened. This guy that I'm portraying did this, and then you start to ask yourself loads of different questions. You know, what would I do? You know, would I have run away? I don't know that I would have run away. I'm not particularly very brave. You know, where's he going? You know, could I find myself in this sort of situation? And that sort of weighs heavy on you, and that can be pretty, you know, it can be pretty depressing. You just think, geez, this guy was just following orders. And it is pretty rough, yeah.
So I think we can all agree that every time commander or higher up in a war movie says we'll be home by Christmas, to run the opposite direction.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever been
Right?
home by Christmas.
That was our first topic of this film.
Yeah, no one's ever been home by
I,
Christmas unless
that was
Santa.
They didn't specify which Christmas.
Exactly, yeah, maybe Santa.
well, I love that
Yeah.
they even made that they made that joke in this series where I forget which character it said. It's like the final victory by Christmas, and he's like, "Did the Fuhrer mention which Christmas?"
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And the new recruits that progressively get younger and younger the more the war goes on.
Yeah, and there are always more and more.
That was one scene. That was one scene that I had a like an immediate. It made me think about the show you were on, Band of Brothers.
Yep.
I think it was either with Percani or Luz. I forget which one. But there's a new guy who's manning a machine gun emplacement with him.
That's Baconti.
And he keeps calling him by he keeps calling him by the wrong name. And he's like,
Brian, yeah.
It's O'Keefe. He's like, you know why nobody he's like, you know why nobody remembers your name? It's because nobody wants to.
Yeah.
And we get that exact same scene in this series where it's like, if you're still here in a month, then I'll learn your name.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I think some of the, you know,
but it's interesting to see some of these tropes carry over.
Yeah, a lot of the veterans that were interviewed, the Easy Company veterans interviewed, especially the Toccoa guys. I mean, their point was it wasn't personal. We just didn't want to get to know these fellas because they'd always end up dying, you know, and they'd end up dying or getting somebody else killed. Do you know what I mean? So it's like that I think is a constant throughout all combat. You know, the new recruits come in, they're full of piss and vinegar. They think, I'm going to come, you know, I've been trained now, you know, I'm going to come out here, I'm going to do this. And they end up getting themselves killed pretty quickly, or they end up getting enlisted, you know, like Band of Brothers, they end up getting Toccoa men killed, and that drives the other guys insane. Do you know what I mean? This young kid's come over, he's done something kind of stupid.
Right.
And he's got like some guy who's made it from Toccoa all the way to just outside Germany killed. And I think that's a constant in all sort of combat situations, and therefore in all sort of combat TV and films, is like Nobody wants to know the new guy. I don't want to know your name. I'm not going to be your friend. I'm not going to like you. Even in All Quiet on the Western Front, it's the same thing there as well. Cap doesn't want to know any of the new recruits either. He tries to look after them, but they're always getting themselves killed.
Yeah, they mentioned that in the Pacific too, where he's like, "Oh, why you bothering getting to know their names? They just die."
Yeah, it takes a while.
Also, another great series.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It takes a while for Rami Malek's character to even give Sledge a name. I mean, then he finally calls him Sledgehammer.
Right.
I mean, he's watched him through a couple of battles, and finally he's
Man.
like, "Gotta smoke," and then he calls him Sledgehammer. Before that, doesn't want to know his name.
Yeah, the two of those guys, man, they killed it.
Yeah,
I love Rami Malek.
yeah, he's great, isn't he?
Great performances in all the shows we've talked about.
Yeah, and for your listeners, if you haven't seen that,
But
if you haven't seen Generation War, go see it. Get it whenever you can. And also, there's another show called Babylon Berlin that the lead actor's in as well, which is brilliant. And it's brilliant because it's sort of Germany in the late 20s, early 30s, or as the rise of Nazism starts. But it's really cleverly done, beautifully done. And you just start to see swastikas in the background and that sort of thing. It's happening really insipidly around them as all these different stories take place. I think the Germans make fantastic television. I don't know who's putting the money in, but they're putting a lot of money in, particularly that show. And the actors are fantastic in it.
Alrighty. So, moving on, Jack, what do you have to drink this evening?
Fresca.
Fresca?
Yeah, I know it's an old lady soda, but I like it. I'm trying to cut back on caffeine and sugar anyway.
I've noticed that if you mix Fresca with tequila and do like a slice of lime, that's pretty good.
Don't be telling me that. Don't be telling me that.
It is. It's a great combo.
Yeah, if nothing else, Fresca makes for a decent mixer. What are you drinking, Matt?
Red wine, actually. I'm usually drinking Newcastle Brown Ale when I do my podcast, but I don't have any. So I stole my wife's red wine. So I've just finished my glass of red wine. Yeah, very nice.
Red wine is amazing. I love it.
It's making me go a little bit.
Very classy too.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm twirling it in a tumbler as we speak, like this. Look, see. As I concoct some evil
plotting
plan.
his enemy's downfall.
As I concoct an evil plan. That's what I'm drinking.
I have myself it's a local brewery, but it is a peach pale ale. It's quite delicious.
Peach pale ale.
You know, you got to hit that. You have to hit the summer fruity beers while you still can.
I do like fruity beers.
Yeah, I live in England.
Pale ales and IPAs, not so much.
Yeah, I live in England. There's no place for peach beer where I come from, I'm afraid. That's a good way to get your head kicked in, ordering a peach beer where I come from.
It's okay. One of my go-to drinks is there's another local brewery around here that pretty much every place carries them on tap, and they have a raspberry flavored Kolsch beer, and it is named Princess Yum Yum.
Wow.
So when I go,
that was my.
So when I go out to the restaurant to eat or to the bar, I'm like, I'll have a pint of Princess Yum Yum, please.
That was my drag name when I was younger.
I didn't know you were that multifaceted in your acting career.
Wasn't always bearded. Yeah, clean shaven. Princess Yum Yum. Made a lot of money. Good times. I don't like shaving my legs anymore, so I gave it up. Also, I'm old as balls, so
That's
yeah,
fair.
it's heartbreaking.
yeah, I know.
The fall of many a
The
good drag
fall
queen.
of many a good drag queen, and I would be one of them, I'm afraid. But you know, the old order changeth, yielding place and time to the new, and good luck to them.
Also, I just love the look of sheer English disgust on your face when we started talking about our favorite fruity beers.
Yeah, that is good old-fashioned English disgust. Are you drinking, man?
It's okay. I
The
think
colonies are rowdy.
yeah, I think English disdain for Americans is pretty common. So
Yeah, not usually from me, but the beer. You need to have a word with yourself there. I'm afraid.
well, before we get too off the rails, I think it's time to give this a rating. And usually, what we do is we give it a rating of 1 to 5 things, and then we check it against Rotten Tomatoes to see if we're close or not.
Okay.
Jack, what do you think the rating? What do you think the rating should be, Jack?
Booby trapped Russian wells.
That is a that's a great rating, and it's a shame we never got around to talking about that particular scene. But
Yeah, that was a huge ass explosion. What did they do?
Packed it full of cork
What did they use?
composite, probably, and then just blew it up. Knowing those crazy armorers.
right,
Yeah,
all
man,
right.
they had no intention of getting away with that either. They just took their lickings.
Yeah.
Gotta respect that.
So
Anyway,
Matt,
Yeah.
1 to 5 explosive wells. What do you give this series?
I'll give it 4.5 exploded wells. But when you go near the half of the well, it's still maybe simmering and ticking. So it might be 5. It might go off again.
Okay,
Perhaps there's a piano nearby that if you play, the well goes up. I'm not sure. But I'll give it 4.5 exploded wells, which is the weirdest thing I've said for a while. 4.5 exploded wells. Yeah. Didn't think I'd be saying that today.
Jack.
that sounds about right. I like the way he put it. Four wells and one's iffy.
Yeah.
Sizzling.
One sizzling, ticking ominously.
I will say I'll give it a solid 4 exploded wells. I think my biggest ding for it is I had a hard time keeping the characters straight in my brain. And that's more of a personal issue, but yeah, if we could have chose a different name for either Friedhelm or Wilhelm, that would have been tremendously helpful to me. But
So, shall we then say that it's 4.5
um,
exploded wells, but your brain has only 2.5 exploded wells?
yeah, we could do that.
Your processing issues have 2.5 exploding wells.
Jack, what does Rotten Tomatoes give this?
So this is another. I love it when this happens. Another critical divide. So the critics give this a 61%, but the audience gives this a 95%.
Oh, wow.
And you know me, I usually go with audiences. I usually trust that metric more so than the nose in the air critics.
Yeah, I would agree with the audience rating on this.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I
don't.
think
As
it's
like I said earlier, some of the criticisms of this show is kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, don't trust people who are paid
It's
to complain
nitpicky.
for a living.
I
Yeah,
don't like nit. Trust us who do it for free.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. They grab a microphone and do it for free.
I'm still negative dollars on this adventure, so
Oh, cool. All right. So trust people who are in debt to do it.
But yes, exactly. I'm doing this purely out of the goodness of my heart.
All right, boys. Well, I got to jump off.
For you, the listener, because that's how much we love our fans.
Indeed. Well, fans, I got to jump
Or
off.
one of them.
I got something else I got to do that involves blowing up wells. So I better go.
Sounds good. So that was Matthew Leitch, actor and podcaster extraordinaire. We're so grateful to have had him with us. I know I've never felt more disappointed in my drink choices.
Expert in bringing
today.
the British bands.
Jack, is this how you feel? But no,
I thrive on English disgust.
Obviously, he had
war.
to leave us a little early. Be sure to check him out. He is on Instagram. He has his own account under Matthew Leitch. And if you want to check out his podcast, which is We Happy Few 506, give that a listen. It's a great time. Jack, do you have anything? All right. Well, if you like the show, please be sure to leave a review. The stars do matter. If you want additional content from us, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at the Armchair Commanders Podcast. We are also on YouTube under the History Apprentice channel. Whose turn? Is it my turn or your turn for next week's movie?
You know, I don't remember.
I'll claim it.
I think might be you. I don't know. I need to look.
You know what? I'll take it. Screw you.
Well, damn. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's your turn anyway. Because I think I picked 300.
So
then the guests invaded.
Pre or post World War II? Post? Pre?
Post.
Making it difficult for me.
Actually, no. Pre.
Oh, yes, you do that all the time.
I love making things hard for you.
All right. Pre-World War II.
Shut up,
Let's
bitch, I know.
do... You know what? Let's do Kingdom of Heaven 2005. The theatric cut, not the director's cut.
Oh, thank God.
Which, for our fans at home, is about the Crusades. Stars Orlando Bloom, Liam Neeson, whole bunch of other people. Jeremy Irons is in it.
That one actor that was in that one thing.
This has a lot of side actors, but do you have anything else, Jack?
I do not.
Alrighty, well, thank you all for joining us again, and thanks again to our guests for joining us. We will catch you next week.
Bye.